Hello there, my name is Luke. Thank you for clicking on one of my videos. Today we're going to be talking about how endurance changed everything in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Let's get started. Endurance governs almost everything in the Souls games. Aside from dictating your character's equipment load, it acts as a resource that you spend when you attack, sprint, roll and dodge attacks. When your endurance bar runs out, you are very limited in what you can do until it recharges. The ebb and flow of your character's endurance bar reflects the ebb and flow of battle itself, and managing this resource is crucial to victory pretty much regardless of your preferred playstyle. You can be a complete tank head to toe in plate, but you need a pretty high equipment load to be able to wear it in the first place. You can be a nimble assassin relying on evading attacks rather than heavy armor to absorb all the hits you take. Both styles require a large pool of stamina to draw on and rely on effectively managing that resource. Space management is crucial as well, allowing the player to put enough space between them and the enemy while their endurance bar recharges. In fact, this may well be the single most important resource in all of the Souls games, and it is one that Sekiro doesn't bother with. Instead of endurance, Wolf and all the enemies that he faces have posture. Posture is broken down when damage is received and when attacks are deflected. It recharges while Wolf guards or if he gives his enemy long enough respite from his relentless attacks, though the recharge rate depends on how much vitality Wolf or his enemy has. The higher the vitality, the faster it recovers. If Wolf's posture bar is filled, he is staggered and his enemy has a free moment to deal damage. If Wolf fills his enemy's posture bar, he has an opportunity to perform a death blow. For some enemies, this bar has to be filled 2, even 3 times before they are defeated forever. Battles still have the same ebb and flow as those in the Souls games, but more time is spent facing the enemy as opposed to running away. Successful deflections fill the attacker's posture bar faster than it does Wolf's, so constant engagement with the enemy is encouraged for quick victory. In fact, victory in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is more often than not rewarded by blocking attacks to fill the enemy's posture meter in order to land a death blow, as opposed to emptying their vitality meter. The player is forced to learn each enemy's attacks and the timings they should use to deflect those attacks. I finally defeated Ishin the Sword Sate by learning all of his moves and how to respond to them. In his first phase, Ishin sheathes his katana and can perform 1 of 2 attacks from this position, the first being a quick slash and then a perilous sweep, the second being a quick double slash. If his katana glints and then he moves quickly, I knew I needed to deflect once and then jump. If his katana glinted and then there was a pause before a second glint, I knew I would need to begin to deflect immediately after the second glint. I learned that I needed to Mikiri counter his thrust a lot sooner than I was used to doing. Each fight, each death was a victory because it gave me more experience that I could bring to the next fight. The posture mechanic forces this deep engagement with the game's combat. For sure, brute forcing your way through the combat is viable, but doing so is to deliberately misunderstand the philosophy that Sekiro is built on. Getting rid of endurance and replacing it with posture is the key to unlocking that philosophy. Posture's effect on the combat mechanics is only the most obvious change though, the ripples of that change reaching all the way through the level design, exploration and even all the way down to the game's setting and story. Sticking with the gameplay mechanics, it can't be ignored how the removal of endurance affects how the game feels. Sprinting is no longer restricted. Wolf can move around a lot faster and a lot freer than his counterparts from previous games. Wolf flows over the hills and valleys of Ashina like water, which in itself makes the combat flow a lot more naturally. At its highest point, the combat of Sekiro feels like genuine duels between matched opponents. Wolf can use his grapple hook in his prosthetic to leap around Ashina as well as close distances with enemies. Imagine how difficult implementing the endurance mechanic would be when thinking about governing how the grapple hook works. Imagine what Sekiro would be like with Dark Souls 1 endurance bar. Doing either forces you to understand how different the removal of endurance makes to simply moving in Sekiro. The grapple hook in particular changes the way that Sekiro's levels are designed. Suddenly, much like in Bioshock Infinite, the player can move in 3-dimensional space as opposed to a 2-dimensional one. This allowed From to build upwards and downwards instead of just outwards. Levels have more verticality, even more so than Dark Souls 3, and fights can be approached in multiple directions. Ashina Castle is a perfect example of this. You can run straight up the staircase and engage with the boss and his 4 henchmen straight on, or you can grapple up to the buildings on either side of the staircase, sneak up on the boss and fall on him from above. You can even bypass him completely, grappling your way over the rooftops into the castle itself, before leaping down to ground level inside, opening a door and approaching the boss from behind. Senpu Temple is another example of this, the entire trip up the mountain being possible with just the grapple hook and a bit of patience. The increased open-endedness of the level design completely did away with the need to build in specific shortcuts a la the looping design of Lordran in Dark Souls 1. Instead, shinobi shortcuts are used to move from one part of the world to another. One of these shortcuts takes Wolf from Lord Kuro's room to the dilapidated temple. Another takes him from the headless mini-boss in Ashina outskirts to the Bell Demon Idol. There's also less reliance on designing secret areas accessed by bringing together objects from opposite ends of the game, because the same secret areas can be reached through clever exploration rather than by using video game logic. Oh, and did I mention that you can swim in Sekiro? The player can use the waterways of Ashina as a way of bypassing enemies, but the real difference here in terms of level design is that it allowed From to create areas below ground as well as above. Wolf learns the Mibu breathing technique after defeating the corrupted monk in Mibu village, which allows him to dive beneath the waves, and when he does, whole new areas of the game are open to the player. New items can be collected and enemies can be fought, introducing entirely new combat mechanics to the already pretty diverse range of options that Wolf can draw on. These increased gameplay options open the way for the implementation of perhaps the most defining of Sekiro's mechanics: stealth. Stealth places greater emphasis on the player's ability to interpret their surroundings than previous From titles, forcing them to be more creative with the mechanics that are open to them. If you are having trouble fighting an enemy head-on, why not try to lure him to a spot where you could take him out from behind, or from around a corner? Why not enrage a beast and get him to take out your enemies for you? Why not turn your enemies into puppets and use them as allies? These options are gradually introduced as the player progresses through the game, but stealth is baked right into the design of Sekiro itself. There are no specific stealth sections and no specific action sections. The whole of Ashina can be stealthed through if the player wishes. Similarly, you can stab everything in the face if you wish as well. Most importantly for this argument is the idea that introducing the concept of stealth as the principal mode of gameplay influenced the setting and therefore the story of Sekiro as a whole. The combination of stealth and sword-based gameplay that provided room for the sort of opaque storytelling and world building that From thrives on dictated the time period, and writing this now, it seems almost unthinkable that From would even have considered going with a period other than 16th century Japan. The world of the shinobi, supported by the myriad Japanese myths and stories that drench Sekiro, was a perfect fit. The setting in turn informed the story, a tale much more grounded and frankly intelligible than the previous games from. The stealth gameplay introduced Wolf's ability to eavesdrop, a mechanic that pulls double service as an expository tool, as well as providing hints and tips to the player themselves. Broadly speaking, Sekiro is a lot less obtuse with its world building and storytelling than previous titles. Characters have actual motives and drives to explain their actions, rather than just a vague insanity that infects the land. The mechanic whereby enemies respawn every time Wolf uses an idol is explained as an infestation stemming from Kuro's dragon heritage, as opposed to a general plague of undead. Wolf has character, shown more in the way he moves and fights than through any dialogue he might have. The more relatable story and setting creates a greater sense of narrative drive through Sekiro relative to the previous Souls titles. The tale the game weaves is a simple one, but no less intriguing or powerful for that. It is a streamlined story, and this is reflected in the more streamlined structure of the game as a whole. Ashina feels like a smaller world than Lothric or Drangleic, perhaps due to the increased use of verticality, but the design is tighter. The paths that the player treads in exploring Ashina branch at Ashina Castle, one direction heading towards Senpu Temple, another the Great Serpent Shrine, a third to the Mibu village, and from there the Fountainhead Palace. Shinobi escape routes connect distant areas together so that it is possible to cross the map with ease. There is nevertheless a great feeling of linearity to the game, which to my mind is no bad thing. It fits perfectly with the story that Sekiro is telling. I've only talked about the big ways in which the removal of the endurance mechanic changed Sekiro, but this change is felt in small details as well. Aside from the setting, the shifted emphasis on deflecting enemies' attacks to succeed removes the possibility of the player changing their weapon. Axes and halberds have less of a place in a world where fast-paced sword play is king. Similarly, the importance of quick, deft movement negated the usefulness of heavy armor. As a result, Sekiro has almost nothing to offer the so-called fashion Souls players. The character stat upgrade system of previous Souls games is out completely, replaced instead by a skill tree unlocked with XP earned by fighting through Ashina. The reduction of the character creation options allowed From to create one main character whom all players embodied, which in turn enabled them to produce a much more narrative-driven and focused game. The Sekiro experience is a much more controlled and focused one from recent From titles. The developers had greater control on the pacing and narrative, and this is made possible by a very simple change in Sekiro's combat mechanics, endurance, or the lack of which, changed everything in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I don't know whether it was a good change, but it certainly was a brave one. The implementation of posture was enough of a change from the games that From has been making for the last decade or so that it was almost inevitable that it would have a polarizing effect. The difficulty, punishing or not, of Sekiro has been a particular topic of comment. I myself have contributed to the debate on the subject, though I was less interested in answering the question per se than I was in looking at ways that difficulty can be modified through gameplay mechanics and level design with greater or lesser success. The debate will continue, no doubt, when the inevitable DLC is released. I, for one, can't wait to see what From does with its new game philosophy. Thanks for watching. Hi guys, thank you very much for hearing me out. I love Sekiro. I only just completed it on Friday night, and the Ishin Sword Saint fight was an incredible culmination of my own experiences with the game's mechanics, and it perfectly crystallised for me everything that I believe Sekiro is about. But I've had my say, now it's over to you. What do you think of Sekiro? Was it a revolution, an evolution, or a plain old bastardisation of the gameplay loop that From has spent the last decade polishing? Subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, engage with me on Twitter. Make your own video in response to mine or on a subject that really interests you. This is my final Souls video, at least until the Sekiro DLC comes out, but it would have to do something pretty special to get me to want to write about From's games again. Next time, we are going to be taking a trip down memory lane to 2002 and a new type of video for me, finding out how Medal of Honor Allied Assault holds up in 2019.